Hey everybody, and thanks for joining us. It is day 14 of Commitmas, and that means that we are right there at the halfway point. I know I've done a lot of learning, and hopefully everyone else has too. So tonight what we've got for you is Eric Wright, and he's going to be covering the art of the ignore by using gitignore. And we also have Jonathan Frappier helping out as a co-host. Eric and John, how are you guys doing?
Oh, very good, very good. Thanks, Kyle. It's been fun to watch this. I admittedly have not been as participatory as I'd like to through the start of it all, but the beauty part is you guys have a wicked cool program going. To quote the Boston local saying, as I've been told I've picked up. It's
It's
Absolutely.
wicked awesome. After this wicked awesome podcast, I'm going to the Packy to get some beers.
That. Yeah, so this is very, very cool. Obviously the fun part about this is it's a good chance for everybody to do real short form, quick stuff. I like the idea that we can, cover interesting things, and it's funny to watch how people have had conversations and like, hey, I've like kind of got stuck on something, and then everybody just jumps right in, and the fact that it's hosted on Git is a great idea. So. Kudos to the team from running this last year and picking it up again this year. So, Jonathan, I'll give you the fine job of reading down the quick notes, as I know that is you do it better than I do.
Yep. So we've.
Yeah, so
I'll actually take it.
I was going to take it. Yeah.
Oh, even better.
So.
I think it's off. This is awesome.
So, administrative wise, if you have any questions or comments, let us know by mentioning either the Commitmas or vBrownbag Twitter accounts, or mentioning Commitmas or vBrownbag hashtags. And we are also going to be monitoring the GoToMeeting chat and question boxes as well. If you happen to miss out on any episodes and need to catch up, you can head over to bit.ly/commitmas2 and make sure that the C is capitalized. Lowercase does not get you there. Found that out the hard way. That's where all the previous recordings are going to be available at. And then lastly, all the information is out there on GitHub. And that is github.com/commitmas/30 days of Commitmas 2015. So, Eric, we're all set.
Alrighty.
I will make you presenter now.
The usual screen switcheroo.
Yep.
And then the games begin. Ah, yes. Alrighty, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Cool. I'm like such a go-to meeting fail at I've done it too many times. He can like it can orchestrate an entire OpenStack environment in 3 different scripting languages, but I can't get GoToMeeting to show the full screen half the time. Alrighty,
It's about the same with WebEx too.
Yeah. So this we're going to talk about the art of the ignore. So for all those who will enjoy the odd movie reference here, being ignored can be dangerous, but it can also be an amazing thing, depending on which side of the ignore you're on. So for those folks that don't already know me, here's the obligatory About Me page. My name is Eric Wright. I'm a blogger, a cloud pundit. I'm also a principal solutions engineer and technology evangelist for VM Turbo, a Boston company, thus my overuse of the word wicked. I also write for discoposse.com, which has little to do with disco or posses, and you can find me at discoposse on Twitter. And for those folks who aren't already connected to me on LinkedIn, I encourage you to do so. And the easiest way is just to do a search for Disco Posse. Believe me, there's nobody else who would lay claim to that. So as usual, big thanks to the vBrownbag crew for running this. I've been lucky enough to be part of a couple of different vBrownbag events, and this is a fun one. So the art of the ignore. One of the things that we get caught up doing is we get all happy because we put our stuff into version control. And I've been a sysadmin, coaching through development teams and working with development teams, and we kind of taught each other some things. And one of the first things I learned very early on is that there's stuff that ends up in the repo that isn't supposed to be there. So there's a neat little file, which is it works on either Windows or Linux or Mac or whatever your platform is. It's agnostic to the OS, but it's called the .gitignore file. Now, you keep the .gitignore file in the root of your repository, and that allows you to just keep sort of a global setting for, or sorry, a repo level setting, so that repository has specific files that you want to stay out of version control. Now, the reason why it's important is because it prevents contamination with stuff like temporary files, config files. If you do a search through, you can actually find tons of SSH keys that are out on GitHub, and both private and public keys. It's super awesome to go through and tell people like, hey, yeah, I totally found this. And if you ever tried to remove those from Git history, it's not pleasant. You actually have to dump the whole repo and then reload it. There's probably some other way to do it, but I have yet to find a nice way to do so. The beauty part is it's easily edited. It's written fairly simply. And again, you know, it's stored in your Git repository. There's an ability to do a global gitignore as well on your system. I kind of don't like doing that just because I want to make sure that, you know, I work with tons of different systems, and I've got, you know, like 5 different, you know, GitHub organizations that I'm contributing to, so I make sure that I keep it localized. So gitignore file is fairly easily, you know, written. You can have blank lines in there, so you can space it out real pretty. You can put comments in. Comments are always appreciated, especially when it's very individual stuff. And most of the stuff is self-explanatory. If you actually do have to catch the hashtag, the hash mark in your file names or in a pattern search, you can escape that just as you do with any other regular expression. So you can use a lot of regular expressions in here. We're not going to dive into that because that's a whole different, like, that's a series unto itself, is regular expressions. That'll make you want to pull your eyes out with a spoon. You can do explicit files. So you can name, like, here's this file name.ini or whatever the name is. You can use wildcards as well, which is super cool, because then this way you know if you've got particular files that are going to be spread throughout, it's going to ignore them throughout. You can exclude folders, subfolders, files underneath subfolders, and there's a lot of different nomenclature you can use. And I'm just going to go through a couple of quick examples to show you, and this is a common one. So configuration files. The reason why configuration files are very cool, but also not cool when they're in your repo, is because they usually contain usernames, passwords, and other information. Even if you just like fill it in temporarily, and then you know, plan to clean it out before you upload it, the trick is that everybody uses the same configuration file. So if your system or your application uses a, you know, config.yaml or database.yaml, as soon as you upload it, it's going to have machine-specific references or something. I would encourage people to go to 12factor.net/config, and you can learn about how to do application building and development using this 12-factor method. And the reason why that's pretty cool is because they talk about using environment variables rather than configuration files. But hey, for the rest of us, we can actually do this, and so we're gonna get right to the good stuff here. Now, where were we here? I'm going to bring up my, now hopefully I haven't got like a bizarrely small screen here so you can see.
Looks beautiful.
All right. So we can see by the Git status, I'm going to use the OpenStack Cookbook as an example because it's super fun to use, and I highly recommend anybody that wants to use that, please go ahead and download the OpenStack Cookbook. Little shout out to Cody and Kevin and Egla for all the work they do. You can go to openstackcookbook.com. I'll take my check at $5 and send it to my local address. That's thank you. So the catch with this is, so we're completely clean. You know, we're on a particular branch. We've got nothing to commit, and you know, let's do a. Yeah, we've got no YAML files. There we go. So we do have some YAML files. Now, this is what's interesting. You know, I've picked a default one that's already got baked-in files. So let's say I wanted to have a new one, and I'm going to call it password.yaml. Now, if I take a look at my Git status, it's going to say, ooh, okay, you've got a password.yaml file that you want to have. Now, here's my best practice for development. You should actually make that a .example file. Oh, sorry. And the reason why that's cool is because then you could actually commit that one. So it'll see it as a password.yaml.example. It's a clean file. It makes sure it's got just like basic stuff in there. So I'm going to just actually edit that one. So in this case, you could, say, username, password, your pass here, user here, right? That's clean. That's the way you should be able to do this. So if you were to go and you were to commit that one, it's safe. However, because we probably haven't got it, we're going to rename it back to YAML. So again, we see it shows that it needs to be committed. So now we're going to edit our gitignore. Now, I use Sublime as an editor, so I apologize. I'm not going to go all nerdy and Vim on everybody. If you don't use a nice, nifty multi-file editor, Sublime is a really wicked cool one to use because it's also cross-platform. One person can buy it in its multi-workstation, so I've got it on a Windows machine and on a Mac machine. So all you do is you can see we've got a bunch of samples that are already in here, and I'll explain just quickly what each of them are for as well. So all I go is go in here and say, look at that, if you didn't use Vim when the live demo didn't happen, just for that I'm going to have to do it on the next one. So I'm going to say star.yaml. I don't want anything .yaml to be committed. So I go back to here. Now, you'll take a look at the difference here. Now, the password.yaml no longer showing up as an uncommitted file. But what we are seeing, of course, is the .gitignore is actually now showing up as needing to be committed. We're not going to do that just for this one because I'm just goofing around, but that's also important because everybody that collaborates, they can contribute to the .gitignore file. So that's an important piece as you kind of go forward. So any config file, whatever file name you want, you can go ahead and do that. Alrighty, so the next one, virtual machine instances. Now this is the most common one because people will think, all right, this is very, very cool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, be smart, and I'm going to use Vagrant and VirtualBox, and then guess what happens? You run the first load, and then you take a look at your Git status, and all of a sudden you're going to have this 60 gigabyte box or some crazy thing that you've downloaded and built. End result is you go to commit it, and it's going to commit that sucker back to the repo. So again, if do I have it still open? Okay, now you can see in our gitignore that we've got right now, we've already excluded star.box. There may also be .vdi, or depending on what the image type is. So it's important that you do that, because if you don't exclude, then what's going to end up happening, and of course here, same thing, is everything under Vagrant. So Vagrant creates a bunch of temp files. Super easy to do. Just block out Vagrant / means everything underneath the Vagrant subdirectory, and continuing is going to be excluded from it. So that's why we don't end up accidentally committing something we don't want. Keys. This is another one, as I mentioned. If you take a look and just Google it out, I remember Rob Nelson told me about some bizarre stat. It's crazy how many keys are out there. So people have both their public and private keys hanging off of some Git repo somewhere, which means we can emulate who they are and access their machines. So again, super easy, because all you have to do is go in here, and we've already got this, we've isolated that the ID_RSA and RSA.pub. We want to exclude those. If we didn't have that in there, then I'm going to comment one out, and let's see what happens. Oh, of course I don't have one. Why do you fail me, demo? That'll teach me not to try the demo before I actually did it. You get the idea.
It'll work after we stop the recording.
Exactly. Same thing with PEM files, cert files, depending. Sometimes you want them there. So if there's explicit ones that you want baked in because they're packaged as part of the development, then you want to package that in there. But for the most part, a lot of that stuff is dynamic. So be very careful. Again, it's super easy to do. Temporary files, again, same thing. Is as you take a look at environments, and we end up with a fill me up temp. We end up with this temp file that's left in there. We take a look at our handy dandy gits .ignore. We block out star.temp. We go back. And the .temp file is no longer going to be committed. So you can see there's really not much to it. And that's, trust me, if I can do it, it's got to be super easy. Now, don't take my word for it. There's definitely a lot of really, really cool docs out there. So these are the nifty links. If you literally just do a Google search out for, .gitignore samples and examples, you'll find a lot of them out there. And there's also a git check ignore. So there's an option to actually test drive what your gitignore is going to look like, which is pretty cool because then you can test it out. Sometimes you may find that there's stuff getting ignored that you don't want or whatnot. So it'll allow you to kind of make a couple of config changes, do a little test drive on it, and that'll bring you to a happy, happy place. And quite simply, that is all there is to it. So just remember, the next thing you do, every time you do your first commit, call it initial commit. You fire that sucker, you push it back to the repo, and then the next thing you should do, if you already didn't do it as part of the initial commit, is create a .gitignore, and I'm just going to actually, God, so many things in here. So right now there's nothing in here, so if I were to do a git init, now we can see there's a .git file. It's got the vagrant file, the only actual file that needs to be committed right now. So I'm just going to touch a gitignore. I'm going to use Vim so I don't get yelled at by Linux guys. And say I actually don't want that one in there. And you notice now the vagrant file is missing, the .gitignore is ready to be committed, and that's all there is to it. So it's just that easy, folks. With that, while the lady at in the movie didn't want to be ignored, your virtual boxes and your SSH keys very certainly do want to be ignored. So please .gitignore with care, and good luck with the rest of your Commitmas.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Anybody out there have any questions or comments for Eric? So far, Twitter's not had too much so far.
That's good. We like that.
No heckling on choice of VI editor or anything. I'm amazed.
I've managed to come off fairly scot-free. I'm guessing it's just because people are busy shopping. So, but again, for anybody who wants to take a look, we've got all the folks that are committing to the repo, to the actual Commitmas repo. We'll have stuff up there. I'll upload my presentation, so it's got the samples there, so anybody can go to the folder. And I'm guessing that's probably the best way to do it. There's really no other code samples to put in, so but when you do go under day 14, you'll find my PowerPoint hiding inside there, and maybe I'll just put in a text file with a couple of samples and rebase all the things and get everybody up to date.
Terrific, Eric. Thank you again.
I'll change back to, I'm just going to pick one of the two presenters here.
Yep, that works, and I will stop the recording.